Thank you very much. Uh, do I need the mic or? Oh, okay, sorry for the recorded session. So at the onset, apologies. I typically don't look into my phone, but I will have to so that I don't stray from the questions I have in mind. But given the fact that we have the benefit of a very, very cozy room, let's try and build in some interaction if it is okay with all the panelists. And perhaps, after every round, if you feel there are things that we want to address further, dive deeper into, do let us know. So with that, specifically since we are speaking about cloud, very quick context setting, which I'm sure is not new to anybody here, right? One of the most explosively growing segments in India presently as we speak. Pretty much as a country, we are looking at a CAGR growth of about 20% well into the next 7 to 8 years. And this in itself is a conservative estimate. It would be something that is definitely more. But at the same point in time, the way we look at the tech transformations that India is embracing today, a lot of them would not really have been possible without cloud. Whether we talk about the digital public infrastructure, whether we talk about the UIDAI, whether we talk about hybrid on-prem, but cloud innovations, cloud accelerations have been really critical to how India has embraced data. And which, on the one hand, and what I plan to speak with my fellow panelists is also about, what are the opportunities that creates? But then also, what are the threats that we need to be mindful of so that we don't really get shortchanged? And pretty much as a market, we see significant investments that have started to float in, whether it is Microsoft, whether it is Google. Everybody has very, very significant plans around investments in the country. But what we also need to be mindful of, and I think it's also something that we see retelling in the manufacturing story, we can't leave the indigenous sector behind. And how really when the pie grows for everybody. And I think that is where we all have a fair play of shared play in really building and defining what that market ecosystem is going to be like, right? I'm sure all of you are aware of the recent DPDP, the digital personal data protection rules that have come into the fore. And they also talk about data localization. So a lot of these elements we will try and cover through my esteemed co-panelists, immense years as market leaders, as people who have really defined this economy. So to begin with, let me actually start with Samir. Let me start with you. For those who are not aware, Samir is the head of HCL Azure Cloud Delivery and has spent almost 3 decades in the IT industry. Since we are really in the frame of setting the context for where cloud is right now and where cloud is expected to go from here, what are the key trends that you see that are really going to shape the future? And for that matter, over the last couple of years, the last 3 to 5 years, how do you see that this segment has evolved?
So as you said, it's almost 3 decades in the industry and I'm still learning. And that is true for IT industry and with the advent of cloud as well. Fine, so it's changing very rapidly. You said that it's growing approximately 20-odd%, that is correct. And with a lot of new technologies coming in, and that digitization which started almost like 10, 12 years back, with cloud taking pace, it has really got fast-tracked. And a lot of services, a lot of technologies are getting built into the ecosystem. And that is what is the paradigm shift in last 4 to 5 years, if you talk. If you look at this particular event as well, fine, and I was downstairs looking at a lot of booths and attended a couple of sessions as well. It is touching each and every sector today, fine. So it is whether it is agriculture, it is your healthcare, it is your consumer services and all that. It is not constrained to one particular vertical. It is not constrained to one particular sector of investors either. You have small scale businesses, you have large scale businesses, even your governments which are doing a lot of works, in terms of agriculture, medical and all that. That shows you that the trend is very, very positive and aggressive and that is going to continue. And with more adoption of your Gen AI, etc., it is only going to be fast tracked. There are obviously some concerns, especially in India market, which are getting addressed with all these, data localization as well as, the new laws which are getting formed up. And that is inviting a lot of global customers as well to move back to India and keep that data into the India region itself. And that's where there is huge investment which is coming from hyperscalers as well as from the private sectors in setting up all those data centers into the India. And that will obviously drive a lot of growth potentials, at least for next decade for sure. Having said that, if you look at today's digitization, fine, we see a lot of successful case studies and adoption, like a lot of banks has gone for the new scale technology adoption and so on and so forth, and they demonstrate a lot of productivity improvements, etc. But still there is a huge technical depth into our ecosystem in India if you look at, starting from your application to infrastructure as well as people. Or the resources, if I call it, fine. So it can be any sort of resources. Now all of these three has to be addressed in a big way, and that would be a big shift and huge business opportunity for India in next 4 to 5 years for sure.
Fair. For that matter, just a quick thing on that, since you mentioned that, pretty much all the aspects are changing very, very fast. In your view, since you mentioned it's the talent, it's the people, it's the technology, if you were to put it in a pegging order of what is really changing fast and what is playing the catch-up game, what would that be for you?
I think I would say that the driving factor is your consumer behavior. And we were talking earlier as well, so earlier we used to drive our behavior and adoption from the global industry level perspective. And now it is driven through the India market. The localization which is required for your Indian consumer is very much getting the topmost importance and the focus from the Indian industry, and that is where this generative AI adoption would be very, very key. If you look at the global trends, fine, and I was just reading that there was a survey which was done with 1,000 of CXOs across 59 countries and 20 odd verticals. There are only 7% who have successfully adopted AI. And if you look at the Indian companies, there is 30% successful adoption in Indian companies on AI side of it. So a lot of players, a lot of the new startups which are coming with a lot of products on AI side of it. I think that trend is really, really boosting the overall journey.
Thanks, Samir. Allow me to introduce Debnath. Debnath is the country head for Azure Cloud business for Microsoft India and South Asia and leads the unicorn businesses for Microsoft here. Debnath, I'm going to take a leaf from what Samir said, right, about really how AI is ramping, irrespective of the sector, irrespective of the various verticals. It's pretty much pervasive. Microsoft, of course, has announced very, very significant investments in India, right? From Microsoft lens, given that you really are at that vantage, what to you are the key segments really that are ahead of the curve in terms of cloud adoption, which perhaps could be the laggard? What's your view on that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. So we just 2 weeks back when Satya was here, we announced the $3 billion investment to the India market. What we have seen is around 2014-15 is when the India market moved from a buyer's market to a builder's market gradually. And that's when really the cloud adoption started taking off. That's also when the India went through the first series of VC-backed startup revolution. So today what I see, if I have to break down the segment that are consuming cloud, definitely number one would be the digital native and the startups. They are using cloud for scalability, for efficiency, for agility. Then of course the large enterprises. In the large enterprises, we have our IDS, which is a very large segment, followed by manufacturing, because if you see manufacturing, it's a misnomer in India, because because of post-independence, capital not being available, we're a very large conglomerate society, right? So they're all basically PE kind of a holding group. So they have a lot of digital natives within them, they have a lot of ITs within them. Think about a Reliance or a Adani or all of them. So that's where huge adoption. Banking. We also are seeing in public sector huge adoption because of Digital India. So those are the 3 tops. But there are few emerging trends. We are seeing in SMB, SMC adoption happening because SaaS and PaaS, because of efficiency, resiliency. We're also seeing healthcare and education, while compared to the other developing geographies, in India, we anticipated healthcare and education is where the AI and the cloud adoption would be the highest, but it is actually was extremely low. But now post-pandemic, it got accelerated, and that momentum is still continuing. So those are the patterns that we see.
Sure. Also, since you mentioned healthcare and education, right, and I think it's pretty much been an industry case study where everybody was rooting for these two segments to really be those early adopters, but they have not really followed the trend. Any insight? Because a lot of startups, if I'm also not wrong, really mushroomed out of in that space. What is changing now that is going to change this mix and really get them back into the game, if at all you think they will get back into the game?
Couple of things. It's actually very complex, and there are a lot of forcing functions at play. One forcing function is market, okay, and by market I mean the GDP per capita of the market. That is a very significant indicator that what is the spending capability of that market. And if you see Indian healthcare market, the insurance market is not strong. It is completely paired, completely cash driven. The profitability of the hospital sector, unlike in US, you have provider, you have payer, and you have like multiple segment. In India. So the amount of capital that you can squeeze out of from anywhere to do technical innovation was super limited. Similarly on the education sector also, this is one country where education is number one priority. And we have a scale problem, and we have a reach problem. So technology can be great enabler, but again, it had become a situation where capital was lacking. But to answer now, what is going to change? Number one, we see that the way today all these segments consume technology will go through two shifts. Number one, there will be, of course, AI impact. AI will have two. One is generative AI impact, which means that there will be copilot for every individual. There will be agentic AI, which means every business process will have an agent. So those two things that will happen. Then you will also see industry cloud coming in. and another thing that will happen is slightly technical jargon. The software stack, which are the UI, which are the application server, which is a database, and which are developer tool, all four are getting disrupted right now. So as it happens, the UI layer is completely getting disrupted. The application servers are getting reinvented. Dev tools are getting reinvented. So as this happens, you never know, some of the emerging segment, which is the MSME and healthcare and education and public sector, might really leapfrog.
Right. Thank you for that, Debnath. Which again, using just that as a segue, right, this entire shift, I'll pivot to Dimitha. Dimitha is the senior director at Fox, and she's really worked across a multitude of industries. Right now she's in media and entertainment, she's worked with shipping, she's worked with retail. So just picking up the thread on, where India as a market is progressing, Dimitha, how do you really see the cloud value chains differing in different segments? And at the same point in time, since we're talking about the increasing prominence of India really in cloud adoption and cloud innovation, how do you really see our movement from really being a low-cost economy to now really being the GCC economy? So,
right, thanks for the question, Dipakshi. So, I think if we sort of just take 5-7 years back, cloud adoption possibly could have been a chat in the boardroom saying, let's adopt, let's start. But today it is no more, those chats. Today the conversations have certainly moved towards saying, we are already there on cloud. We need to move towards cloud. But at the very same time, businesses are also evolving and making products that are, that are being generated out of the cloud, right? So if we were to go back to industries, let's say like shipping, these industries have been there for 100 years in the market, right? And there, the whole way of running the business was, I'll write onto papers. There were, of course, Excels and all of those conversations that were there. But with cloud coming, the visibility into how my business is running, that has evolved to such an extent that business wants to see today everything real time, and that has impacted the money rotating in the markets, right? And coming to India as a conversation, everybody, we of course have a lot of advantages. We have the best of the, we have the young crowd, everybody is into tech, everybody is adopting to things fast. So one of the best things that India has is the digital workforce is pretty adaptable. Today, I'm working, let's say, on a native tool, and today I'm on cloud, and tomorrow, AI is also being adopted pretty fast. One of the advantages in India is the digital workforce. The second thing that India brings to this whole conversation of, as you were saying, towards GCC economy is purely because India has proved that it can actually visualize from the point of how to source it to how to serve it to the end boardrooms or to the customers. The whole value chain comes together pretty naturally, right? So if we were to go back to, an example of, let's say, a CPG, a salesperson on the ground going and selling in a village, let's say, in let's say Madhya Pradesh, the data that moves faster towards the boardroom to say that today the sales, is X. So let's take the example of Mahakumbh. I think that's a pretty in thing in the today's conversation. So if I was actually the government head and I want to see how many people are moving, what are the sales, how is happening, I want to actually sell something. That is what cloud adoption has done, and the way India comes into the market is irrespective. I'm sitting in India, but I'm able to see how NFL games are being played in US. I'm sitting in India, I'm seeing how the weather conditions are changing in Australia. So in short, the cloud has, as Samir was rightfully saying, and Bikram also touched on it, all the layers of how the data moves, and how you perceive it. It's become so fast. It's impacted business. And India's workforce has really put fire behind it to say that I'll bring it to life. And I'm sure business is now greedy to see how how it can actually take a lot more from that.
Fair, and I think especially just the data that as a country we are producing and we are processing kind of gets me now more into the policy side of things, which are really, really going to shape, how the industry is shaping up. And I'll come to you, Debnath. When we talk about, let's say, and right, like Dimitha just mentioned, right, just the amount of data that is getting processed, just the kind of intelligence that is getting processed, somewhere down the line, a couple of years ago, the thought process also was that if we don't control our data now, it's really going to be a business impact a couple of years down the line. To the extent that in the DPDP proposed rules, they have brought back the provision of data localization, even though we don't know about the cross-border rules and we don't know what really has to be localized. Data localization. How do you really see that, what are the contexts? How do you really see the pros and cons of really the discussion of data localization in a very Indian context, but also a place in a very global economy?
Okay, all right, this is back so I can use it. All right, so for DPDP Act, I think most of the provisions in the DPDP Act, like absolutely essential, make sense, but the only one which is point of this conversation is data localization, data residency. I think there are three pros to that for sure. Number one, of course, you have data sovereignty, you have more transparency where the data is, you have more control, the data doesn't cross your border, so you might have better security around it, that you can prevent it from unauthorized access or breach, although that's questionable because it really doesn't matter where the data is, it's about the control that you put. But the third aspect is it can drive more investment in the local region on more data center capacity, more technology, creating jobs and all of that. So that's the pros. And again, we borrowed the leaf from the European books. It's not something that you see across the world. So what are the cons? The number one cons is the operational cost just goes up. It goes up for everybody. It goes up for the provider. It goes up for the consumers because you have to create duplications everywhere. The second is it increases regulatory complexity. Just go and speak to anyone in the BFSI sector, you will know what they're going through every day. And imagine a situation like, because we have GDPR also in Europe. Imagine a German MNC where the HR is German and he's trying to take an Indian employee CV and trying to send to another person in America. Imagine the complexity, right? The German person's data cannot leave German boundary, the Indian person's data cannot leave Indian boundary. How do you actually make things work? Where are you breaching the compliance, right? The regulatory compliance complexity goes up, and that goes to the third, which is stifles innovation, right? So now from the Microsoft side, we have like robust security, privacy, and compliance to be to address all the localization requirement. But I think we also need, as a nation, some kind of a balance between compliance and innovation and growth.
It's actually a very good segue into just what I was about to ask Dimitha, and something like I was sharing with you, right? coming out from a government meeting this morning, and a very interesting perspective was around the innovation and regulation conundrum. And one person from a think tank said that if you were to look at it, yes, over-regulation is always bad, but some regulation, some governance will always help build trust in the system. I think it's just about that fine line about where that lies, right? And especially the pointers around the costs, around really the hassles on ease of doing business, they are immense. Which brings me, Dimitha, to something that we were discussing just yesterday, right? When we talk about data governance, especially against the backdrop of enormous data, which is just going to grow more and more by the day, right? What's the role of data governance? How do organizations prioritize data governance to foster this entire ecosystem of trust, privacy, everything?
No, I think it's a fantastic question, because whenever we talk about data, the larger part of the conversation is, let's just source the data, bring it into ecosystem. Now, when you bring as much data, so let's take the example, with Fox. I am a media group. I'm getting data from news. I'm getting data from sports. I'm also running channels, so I'm getting data from entertainment. But when you have so much of internal data, plus I'm having so much of data coming from the external sources, because I'm also monitoring my competitors, plus I'm having my social media data to see how is everybody reacting to my work and my business every day morning. If data governance is no more a sideline chat, right? It's not a team that is sitting in a silo and saying, I'll create a rule book, you take it, if you feel nice. Those are no more the conversations. Data governance is a conversation that's going up, rolling up almost at the CIO's level, saying, when you bring this data, you build the trust almost at the point of its generation, and you actually start saying, I'll bring it in only because I trust the data, because at the very same time, businesses cannot afford a wrong way of presenting the data, or a wrong data being presented, right? So data governance, to start with, has to be a strategy discussion. It needs to be married into the whole ecosystem of how will I bring it in, how will I make it lean, and how will I use it. Now, at the very same time, I was reading an article, it was pretty interesting, is we get so much data and we do not even process, at least 50 to 60% of the data, we just keep it in our servers and stuff like that. And this dark data that we sort of do not use, almost ends up not giving the rightful insights to the business. So data governance not just builds the trust in the conversation, it also has the ability to tell you if you process all your dark data that are sitting in the servers and the logs and all of those, and even the business data that's not been used for ages. So should I take an example of a CPG company? I'm in the market for 100 years. I have data of 100 years to tell the patterns. But should I say that I'll take the data only for the last 5 years and I'll put governance in, or I'll actually do it from tomorrow morning? That is so much of an insight that is lost in the ecosystem. So data governance is one, you start bringing it from the ingestions, you think about it as a policy, it's an everyday thing, and also you have to focus on your dark data sets that you're possibly not using. And the last point that I would like to mention when it comes to data governance is, data governance is no more a descriptive thing, right? Saying, oh, you tell me the data is not working. Oh, that's a corrupted set. Let's not bring it in. But it's also about, how do I predict that I'm actually going to get a corrupt set? How do I also say that if I bring this in, it's going to it's going to disrupt the way the business is actually flowing. So data governance has so many layers that just thinking about I'll bring the whole set in. That's one of the threats that the data teams largely face, that you actually see it in a storytelling fashion. You see that, where all I can actually get, where I can get hit by. And be predictive about it and not think it like a side discussion.
Thank you for that. As somebody who's been a consultant half her work life, I so relate to storytelling is most of it, but 80% of the work actually is really going through those trends, figuring out what is happening. And from that hook, today when we talk about data centers, Samir, back to you, right? Somewhere down the line, purely whether we talk about increased connectivity, increased affordability, or just the fact that digital solutions have really permeated into the society, India really is seen as a market that creates a lot of data. And if I'm not wrong, that figure stands somewhere between 28 and 30% presently. But at the same point in time, our contribution to data centers purely in terms of volumes is not even 3% or 4% of the global economy, 5% at best. And that would also be if I'm assuming that IDC figures this time change their route, right? Increasingly, when we talk about, let's say, critical information infrastructure or anything that is very important, the conversations are going about the Indian data center policy has been in the works since 2020. We don't know when it will come. But at the same point in time, we need more data centers in the country also, right? Especially when we talk about the information. In your view, what is really holding back our drive, or for that matter, our progression in terms of establishing data centers?
I don't think anything is holding back now, right? And it's again business driven. If you look at today, there is huge investment. I think we talked about AWS talking about investing more than 13 billion. Microsoft is investing, heavily into a lot of data centers, and same is true with Google as well. And not only these large-scale hyperscalers, even your private, the players like Reliance is opening a data center. Adani is setting up a huge data center in Maharashtra. Then a lot of other IOTA and all that. Right? They have pretty huge plans for setting a lot of data centers in India, which is going to increase capacity a lot. Now, obviously, that is, they see the demand, and that is where they are setting up all of that. Today, if you look at the consumption is approximately 80%, which is pretty good, but it is going to become more and more higher, specifically with generative AI, where you need a lot of computing, right? And you talked about 30% data, but then that 30% data is generated for global companies, not only for Indian applications or Indian companies, fine. But that piece is growing, that percentage which is getting generated for your Indian companies, fine. And success of some of these small apps and companies, which were startup just on a particular app, and now they are multi-million-dollar business, has really changed the, the perspective of Indian market. And people are realizing that yes, if you have innovative solutions, if you can reach out to the consumers, if you can give them a different experience based on their demographies and the likings, you are going to have a good business. And that is what I'm hearing since morning in all these sessions as well. People are focusing on that, and they are leveraging generative AI to create that kind of flavor for people. I'm sure it's very, very aggressive, and very lot of opportunities in that space for sure. And people are really looking for state-of-the-art data centers in India. And with all these, what you talked about, the data localizations and the laws coming from, the government, which are open-ended, and a lot of geopolitical reasons and economic, instability is also moving a lot of global players to move back to India and reside their data centers here. And so far, it was all limited to, I think, 6 or 7 states in India, largely. But with edge computing coming, the local regions for your backups and all that is coming, they are expanding that into the tier 2 cities as well, which is a big plus as an economy shift for the India as a country.
Right. Just, a counter question on that, and I'm wearing now a devil's advocate's hat here, right? On the one hand, and rightly so, you're also gunning for an increase in data centers in the country. But on the other hand, also coming to fore is the economic impact, the sustainability impact that data centers have, right? For every Netflix movie that you watch, or for that matter, every Gen AI search that you run, right? Those numbers are really, really filtering into the regular living room conversation now. To you, what are therefore, how do we really take a look at those environmental and sustainability factors? Because it's I think, also a double-edged sword. That's important for prosperity, but then we also have to be mindful, let's say, of the other factors that come into that. Your view on that?
No, that is true, fine. And if you look at all these data center demand, it will be approximately 1350 megawatt kind of demand, which would be there with by end of 2024, compared to 800 megawatt, which was there in end of 2023, right? Or 2022 kind of. So within a year or two, it is growing like 50-60%, which is a huge shift, right? But the beauty of the change is that all of these companies are very much focused onto the sustainability, be it the data center providers or the service providers like us, or the consumers which are building, or not consumers, the product companies or small startups, right? There are three segments if you look at. One is where data centers are set up as green data centers, and whether it is Microsoft, Google, AWS, or private data centers, it is all based on very strict compliance policies. Consumers like us or service providers like us, fine, we look at starting from the asset value chain, fine, how much you can reduce the wastage of that electronic goods, and how much you are able to reconsume those electronic goods. That is also a very huge focus area for every company today. And it is, again, I'm just using her words, it is not a boardroom discussion. It is an on-ground, actionable, as well as demonstrable activities which are happening on ground, because your compliance penalties are very high.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of companies which has been penalized globally, fine, and it is happening in India as well. And the third segment is your sustainable solution. That is also becoming very, very important and key. So these three segments are really making sure that the impact of this growth, which is happening in IT industry, is not impacting your nature and not impacting your environment. Rather, it is making it better.
Fair. And great points. Moving on to Dimitha. And I'm now just getting into, the way forward, things we need to be mindful of. Purely from the India talent trajectory, where India really slots, we are known to be the talent workhouse for the world, right? Where do you really see the vectors on which we lag or we lead the product and process developments, is from a value chain perspective for cloud?
So it's a very interesting question, because being in the industry for about 20 odd years, when we started, it was all about, I'm here for supporting a particular application, or I'm here to be part of a business X. So I've been asked to take care of this every day morning, and I do that, right? 8 hours of my day. And today, let's go back 5 years. 5 years back, everybody was into the chats of saying, oh, I actually take care of a product. I think product became a thing, and then everybody's talking about, I'm building a product X, or I'm being part of this, and so on and so forth. But, and always the conversations were largely about, I do this, and this is what I contribute, right? And there are some pitfalls to this conversation, because with the pace at which every business is expecting each resource to deliver value back to them, we cannot afford to sit back and say, I'm doing this because, my +1, my +2, my +3 had defined a roadmap, and I'll go ahead and I'll actually, do this. And second part to that conversation is, I also cannot just be sitting saying, I am an Azure person, right? Or I am an AWS person, or I am, let's say, a .NET person. Today, the world is moving pretty fast. You need to be a person who are able to articulate the work that you deliver as clearly and as precisely as your business owner would do. You know what value you'll actually derive of it, and you also are able to, on the contrary, go back to the business product owner and say, you know what, should you actually miss this in the design, your consumer is going to be hit. So in a nutshell, what I do expect the whole of the Indian workforce to do is be into the weeds, ask the right questions, understand the business value, be able to contribute into the conversations as passionately and as as a designer, you should actually wear that badge pretty proudly and then keep talking about it, and not just tilt towards being, I hold tech. Tech is absolutely necessary, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty proud of all the technologies that I worked with, but every technology equally needs to be married with the business value, the business storytelling, and when you are out in a conversation with your peers from your global teams, be it a US team and a UK team, if they are able to add points, and if you are just adding the technical vision of it, we will be we will still be a little behind in the conversations. I think that wearing that hat of I am adding a technical vision to my business product is what I would love all the Indian workforce to start thinking. It needs the workforce to be a little bit more bolder, ask questions, and I have particularly seen in Fox, wherein I've had my junior of the developers, sitting in a conversation with my VP and saying, oh, if we bring this data set like that, that's going to break. The passion that you reciprocate back to the global companies is what will make them believe in the workforce back in India, and that flow of work is going to look a lot more different, and that is my vision for sure, and that is the 2 cents that I leave, that whatever you do, don't just say, I'm doing this, and I'm actually contributing to the business with X dollars. That's going to make it look pretty different.
Which loosely, if I were to also say, right, it's also tying back into the 6 thinking hats of Edward de Bono. It's really about, can you wear a different hat irrespective of the profile you hold today, right? Yeah. Which gets me to the finishing question, to a very, very interesting panel. And Debnath, that is for you. You mentioned with GenAI in your opening remarks, how that is really, really shaking up the way the Indian market is coming up. Now, with GenAI, now with agentic AI coming in, what is your view on the homegrown cloud enterprise at this stage? Because one feedback that we also often get is that the hyperscalers, because they control such a massive part of the market, there's not a lot of freedom for, let's say, the local cloud enterprises to come in and play. How do you think, is that valid? Is it something that there's more to it, more than what meets the eye?
It's a very complex question, so let me see if I can, because it has multiple layers, so I'll try to just break it down. Because if we become heat-seeking missiles and not be very strategic, we will just end up in an accident and not create value. So it is the thing. What is AI really doing? What are we trying to do? We're trying to democratize intelligence. That's all we're trying to do. Okay. Once we democratize intelligence, it does something fundamental to our economic value chain, which is it lowers the floor. That means now, because intelligence has been democratized, so now it is far easier for everyone to be more intelligent with the help of technology. Okay, so the floor is lower, but at the same time the ceiling goes higher up, right? Because now the bar is also high for everyone. It suddenly creates a much larger playing field for everybody. Now what does it mean? It means that first of all productivity goes up for man, machine, everything. It changes to fundamental business model transformation. So that means everything that we are using today, experiencing today, will become faster, better, and cheaper over time. So that will happen. Now, as this is happening, here we have to figure out where we think about Indian homegrown enterprises should play, right? Because everybody should play at the right place, otherwise it will be a disaster. The play area should be where the value creation happens and we are in a position to create value. There are areas where, for example, the space that Microsoft is investing, I know the area that I am building, which is building the supercomputer, building those large language model, it's going to get commoditized before even we know it, right? So we know we are playing in a commoditized category, but we have that capital and the talent and the IP to be also build the additional value. And we'll be continuously in that path. But let us see if a homegrown small enterprise with not sufficient capital starts playing at a commodity layer and can't create value, right? It's not going to go anywhere. So we have to figure out The principle that we coach our partners and our customers, take what is there as a commodity and build the value on top of it. That's where we need to play. That's number one. Now, what will get in the way as we try to do that? It will be skill, it will be governance, it will be cost. Skill that she was talking about, I'll go just one step above it, because from Microsoft we had really, because unless we solve the skill problem in India, we will not be able to get this going. So number one, for skill, couple of years back, we announced that we want to skill around 2 million Indian citizens by 2025. We just entered 2025. We ended up training 2.4 million. 64% of them were women, 75% came from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So now when Satya was here, we announced we will train 10 million Indian citizens by 2030. So that's number one goal. Number two, governance is going to become challenge. Like, we might try from our side to make sure the AI model is being developed responsibly, used responsibly, but in a large market like India, distributed market, how do you control that? And the third is cost. Sustainability is going to escalate very quickly. So towards that, ideal outcome would be a lot of startups, lot of companies working. So towards that, we're doing two things. Number one, Microsoft Research has started collaborating with Indian AI Innovation Network. And there the goal is to cultivate the AI ecosystem in India. So for example, our research team directly working with a startup called PhysicsWala in building mathematical reasoning model, because we need to democratize education and edtech. So how do we use advanced model like O1 and O3 to make that happen? The second is, we recently signed a MOU with SAS Bhumi, which is a B2B startup community. And so we are bringing our expertise and their network to create, and there is a 5-year aspiration that we have taken. So I'll take you through the aspiration, because this is what the role we have to play as we build the infrastructure, as we build the commodity. If we don't build the rest, so our goal is to support 5,000 startups through that community, 10,000 entrepreneurs, upskill 150,000 startup employees, build that foundation in around 20 tier 2 cities, create around 2 lakhs jobs around as we do that, help to attract $1.5 billion of venture capital fund towards these, support around 50 unicorns and sunicorns, and all of that around the AI ecosystem of India. So that's what we're doing from the skilling side, from the AI, the startup ecosystem support side. But we'll continue to see a lot of innovation here. So as long as the organization and the startups play in the value creation layer and not in the commodity layer, we should be fine.
Great inputs. Thank you very much, because I think what I really take away from this is it's all about creating that access at the right place, asking the right questions, and really getting people to figure out what the blue ocean is rather than massacring the proverbial red ocean time and time again. I do believe we are at the top of the time, but if you guys have any questions, happy to take this. Yes?
Hi, thank you very much. Hi, thank you very much. That was very, very helpful. I had a question around MSMEs, essentially. Given that digitization of MSMEs has been much talked about by the government, and it has been a priority, or so it has been made to be seen as. And I know for a fact that there are companies such as yourself and other cloud service providers who see it as a considerable part of their market as well, given it occupies a large chunk and it has much to offer. Having said that, we see that digitization of MSMEs and the cloud adoption therein is limited even now to this day. And what often is seen is that individual companies work towards increasing that penetration. However, when we think from a governance point of view, the government, although it's much more pronounced when they talk about financial inclusion, we see extended credit line system, etc. But when they talk about digitization of MSMEs, it comes under blanket Digital India program, and someone is doing it, something has to happen. I just wanted to understand, would there be merit in cloud service providers coming together? Is there any opportunity to engage with the government to actually perhaps just hash this out further so as to make it a priority that actually gets some concerted efforts from the government, given affordability and the complexity of adopting clouds, despite efforts from individual companies have not fructified as to desired outcomes when it comes to adoption of cloud in MSMEs? Thank you.
You can use.
Okay.
All right, so it's a great question, but it's very hard to solve at a scale for anyone, be it government or be it. So the best way to solve it would be to do it on a need basis, right? Where the need is most, can we provide some support? For example, the startup community, they definitely need tech intensity, and we need to give the technical infrastructure, we need to give them the capital infrastructure, we need to give them the GTM support, and that's where we're bringing it in, right? Now, when you go to MSME, that's a very broad market because you have a manufacturing there also, you have a banking there also, and you have like everything there, and the range is broad from 5 crore to 500 crore. So there, I think in India it is a little difficult because it's a low ticket, high volume market, right? So for any MSME, making sufficient margin and extracting capital out to invest is always a challenge. So most important would be if the business where the MSME is, which needs a digital channel to reach out to their customer, right? They will figure out a way to do it anyways. If that is not a requirement, then if you just try to adopt IT on your internal back end for better efficiency and resiliency, you need to have an economical business model to make it happen. That economical business model, when you're small and you're selling to the domestic market, which is low ticket and high volume, may not be there. That's the hard reality. That's where you expect government comes. How do you expect to solve it? Give you some donation, some fund, some capital, 25 lakh rupees, it's not going to solve, right? So there, how do you then go to a slightly, and that is a push that government now, if you see, started making. In India, we haven't focused building in India and selling globally. Except the ITS industry, no one else has done it. China, this is exactly how, be it manufacturing, be it services, now be it the digital native. Like in India, 2014 to 20, our focus was we were a resource constrained, infrastructure constrained country. So startups came and plugged those holes. Be it a delivery, be it a cab or anything, right? Everywhere it was about plugging India's infrastructure holes, and now we have an oligopoly in every area. On the other hand, in China, from the very beginning, it is C2G policy, China to global, right? That build in China, sell globally, because that is the only way you create economic surplus, right? So that's what my recommendation
And
would
if
be.
I may add to that, right, purely from an MSME policy perspective, since you spoke about the government, I think today there are a lot of very, very focused policies, or for that matter, across the table, if you have a policy which is going to impact either the market expansion or the supply chain, there would be a carve out for the MSME players. Right from the public procurement policies to how you really go about, creating funds for ensuring that organizations don't get left behind, to including, increasing the revenue thresholds about when or where do you really get classified as MSMEs, those depreciation percentages. I think all of those really are there with a concerted effort that I think as a country we do realize that the middle 60 to 70% enablement is going to happen through MSMEs, right? And today, especially, let's say, if you have very focused ideas across ministries, and I'm not just talking about the MSME ministry, but right from Ministry of IT to Ministry of Commerce, there's a very keen lens in every stakeholder conversation about will this adversely impact MSMEs or not? So just wanted to add that.
In fact, government has added in the procurement policy, if you're an MSME, even if you're
Yes.
a L2 bidder, you will still get the preference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So all that effort is still being, but the companies, the MSMEs themselves have to create economic surplus.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name again. Mayuri. Right. So my take to this question, just from a product point of view, is what is the challenge that MSME? I mean, what would be the business case that that an MSME wants to build in the cloud, and then they're not able to do it? Because if you ask from my perspective, cloud is pretty democratized. It's everything pay as you go, right? If you want to use cloud to reach to your customer, I think it's fairly, an open thing. Is it a technical challenge that you want, the government to come in, or is it more about because it's already pretty democratized?
I think it's more of the capital
So basically the experience, because I operate, like for both of you, based out of India, you serve a global customer, very different economy. I'm based out of India, serving Indian customer for an American company. So the hard reality in India is, for an MSME in India versus an MSME in Germany versus an MSME in US, right? $25,000 investment for an American or European MSME is not a big deal, right? A 5 lakh investment for an Indian MSME is a big deal.
Right.
And right, so capital is really a challenge. Profitability is a really challenge. Profitability, why? Margin wise, but it might be okay. But in India, how the days of sales outstanding, the collection of the money that you like, all of that eats into your capital so much, right? At the end of the day, in your P&L statement, you have only so much left.
Right. So, okay, if it's not a technical thing, then. No, go on.
If we are done with this.
Oh, all right.
Right, so we are calling this era as like the fourth industrial revolution, right? So we know that we were struggling in the first three. But this, at least we are saying that India is rightly placed, because of our talent and all the things are right. But what are we doing for the new trends? I know we have been catching up with all of this stuff till now, because now the conversation is about India here. Cloud is more global stuff and we know the kind of solutions that's there and we are using it. But when it comes to the new trends that's going on, like say, metaverse is coming in. We know that digital twins, it's coming up everywhere. And cloud is in fact enabling it, complete edge computing solutions and all that. So what kind of trends that India should pick now so that we become global leaders? Because I know we have been doing this services for all of them. Our GCCs are basically supporting them. But where do we see as the leaders of cloud, what do you see is in India's hand and what should we target?
I have a strong opinion on that. Great question. So many of the boardroom sessions that we do, I usually start with this speech and I'll share it with you, right? It's a very sensitive one, but since you asked that question with so much of passion that what India should do next, let me share the point of view. We are not in a really good situation, and I'll share the data with you, and we have a very little time to fix it. So let me start with, while we feel very proud about being a $3 trillion economy and probably the third largest economy, right? When you go to GDP per capita, which literally captures productivity of the nation, right? Goods and service produced by all the people in that country. We are one of the lowest. Any guess what is the average GDP per capita in the world, in the crowd? Anyone in the panel? $13,000 average, right? That's how much value 8 billion people in the world is creating. That's the sum total of goods and services divided by people. That graph looks like a hockey stick. It's almost vertical. It's almost 90 degrees over last 150 years. Because of the industrial revolution, digital revolution, our productivity has been going up like crazy. It was $6,000 around 2005, just to give you a sense. It was around around $2,000 in 1990s. So that's how rapidly it is moving. In that, any guess where India is? Around $3,000. That's our GDP per capita. Now we can always say we're a very large country, 1.2 billion people. So no matter how much you produce, we have so many poor people. Just divide it, it will be a small number. So what? We took 500 million people out of poverty, so that's a great 3 trillion. Here's the thing, just our neighbor with a similar size of population, any guess what is their GDP per capita?
5,000 or 11,000?
Any other guess?
Neymar is a little above.
Any guess in the crowd? Just take a guess. Worldwide average 13,000, India at 3,000. Okay, by the way, let me tell you, in 1990, both of us were at $600 per capita. Same, 1990, just before economic liberalization happened in India. So today, our neighbor with equal 1.3 billion people, any guess where they are? They are the worldwide average. They're 5 times more productive than us. And if you walk into that country today, you'll realize why, because of technology adoption. Because people only can be so much productive. It is people plus technology, people plus tool, people plus machine makes productivity happen, right? And GDP per capita is also an indicator of the quality of lifestyle in that country, the respect that country deserves, the future that country holds, the surplus money that they have to invest back and future growth of that. We're in a very bad state. And here's the thing, we have a demographic dividend that's going to last only next 20 years. If we do not use the next 20 years to adopt tools, technology, machines like crazy, and let go of this thing that we have enough number of people cheaply available, let's use it. Because that's so low productivity, we will continue to remain a poor country forever. If we want to become an economic powerhouse, your question was where we should focus. Our focus should be, technology should not be for the sake of technology. It should be to create business value. In the case of a country, it should be creating economic value for the country. And that is as simple as skilling the people of the country like crazy, adopting technology in the country like crazy, being maniacally obsessed about increasing the productivity of the citizens of this country like crazy. That's what China did, and that's what we should be focused on. And if we can get down to $10,000 by 2040, we'll be lucky, because that's all the timeline we have.
I was just about to add, I think increasingly we are also, just to add on to that, not add on to that, but just a reservation I've always had is, right, increasingly with tech adoption, we are also in a space where that quintessential haves and have-nots is really going to come back in, because once that digital divide really deepens, it's going to be really, really difficult to cover that ground up.
So economically, so I would recommend all of you to read one of the book among many. It's called Breaking the Mold. So it kind of talks about where India should focus. And that's where I realize our focus on manufacturing today, we feel so proud of so many manufacturers. We're so, because the topic of this session is value chain in cloud. That value chain in the economy is lowest point of value. Right? In an iPhone production, the space that captures the least amount of value is where the production of the iPhone happens. Right? And that's what we are picking up. And by the way, it doesn't have any future of creating more value. So where should India then focus? We need to pick up sectors, themes that creates more value for the country, more value for citizens. And by the way, when IDS started 20 years back, when GCC started happening, you know what happened? One sector of the economy became more productive. The moment they are more productive, their income goes up.
Yeah.
And that has a ripple effect. That extra surplus income immediately plows back in the economy, right? And then the maid working in that employee's house gets to send their kid to the English medium school, right? The driver driving the car for that gets to send their son to engineering school. So the society goes up. So there is always an incremental value of anybody, anywhere being more productive, because it has a ripple effect. It has a second degree effect. It has a third degree effect. And that effect is always positive. Have and have-nots, of course, will increase. But have-nots really depend on the haves to do something for them, right? So the haves, the more they have, the have-nots also have a share of that, and it has their next generation goes up. So we have to now be obsessed about taking this country to $10,000 plus. If you're in the startups, one of the frustration in Bangalore, which is our Silicon Valley, is the TAM that you go after, the TAM in India, its disposable income is so small. Right? You build a subscription-based startup today, because I'm also an angel investor. I sit down with a lot of VCs, part of many accelerators. It's a frustrating situation in the Indian time today. Like if you have a subscription-based, you build the next Swiggy, right? And you would build a business case and go present to VC. Do you know what is the TAM? In a 140 crore citizens nation, what is really your TAM that you can sell to people with sufficient disposable income in metros? Any guess? It's 40 lakh. Literally that 40 lakh everybody is chasing, from Amazon to Netflix to Swiggy's to Olas of the Ubers to Blinkits and everybody. That's it.
About to say 2%, but it is even lesser than 2%.
Yeah.
No, I also actually thought the terms.
It's 40 lakh. And so that's how tiny, right? So, and we desperately need that 40 lakh to become 4 crore. Right? So, and when you think about the startup economy and everybody, the magic number for GDP per capita is $4,000. Right? If you read that book by called Nudge, you'll realize that pretty much everything has a nudging point. Suddenly, it's an inflection point. Right after that, some magic. It is the last straw that broke the camel's back kind of a thing, right? So that's $4,000. Suddenly, after that, the nation reaches a point where they have just enough disposable income to give birth to so much of other additional economic surplus. So we need to. That is why we need technology, not because it is a shiny thing like AI or anything else, right? We need technology to make our citizens more productive.
And just to sort of complement or a different perspective to Bikramjit is, when we are looking at the global markets at a pretty large level, global markets are saying that they want to do multiple things in India. They're pretty proud of, we having a Swiggy, we having a faster e-commerce, because they still don't understand a 10-minute delivery. They don't. Yeah. They also don't understand that so many services, can happen pretty fast in India.
Including the MyGate approvals.
Oh yeah, of course. So I've had my, my senior folks coming in this. So they said, "Can I have a tea?" And I said, 10 minutes away, right? So for them, right? And I think we're doing. Folks who have, they possibly are doing, but folks, my perspective to the whole conversation is, how can global look towards India to make it, to bring global money back to India, in other words, right? Like possibly, the Middle East did with the oil, and we'll do it with, we'll do it with our workforce, and we'll do it with our data and our cloud and stuff like that. But for me, I think the more we are able to visualize the larger picture, saying what all I can do, if a farmer can, adopt to an IoT, which a farmer back in US is doing to look at, their sort of 100 acres of land, that would be one of the use cases. But metaverse certainly is a thing that I have seen in play for CPG companies, wherein they are trying to find the behavioral patterns when a lady or a gentleman walks into a store, and their heat maps and how they react and how they do it in a metaverse as a conversation. I think metaverse is something to look forward to, and with so much data that's sort of floating, metaverse is going to make things a lot more it's just going to be, totally another world. I was just there in the Sports for Tech conversation. So there, the gentleman was saying, I would like my nephew to bowl from Australia, and I will stand here and I'll actually bat from India. And, the boundary is going to be somewhere in London. So there, that is an absolutely fantastic use case, and metaverse is going to make the world a lot more smaller, a lot more, accessible. So my vote would be for metaverse.
Just one thing I want to share about the 40 lakh TAM that I shared with you, right? So that's the profitable TAM. The TAM that you can, if you give away product for free, yes, your TAM is much bigger. But at the end of the day, you have to make profit. You need to be able to have customers who are willing to pay the premium for higher quality, higher value. And the moment you start, for example, as long as the Swiggy is giving you rebates, there will be a lot of orders. The moment they go full price and reduce the rebate, drop. So then who are left? That's the profitable TAM, right? So that's 40 lakh. Now you know why, except few as Zerodha and MMT and all, everybody is at a loss. The VC community, the startup community is just waiting for this TAM to grow. Because they're like, now I have established, there is demand, but we are all keeping our finger crossed that this 3 trillion economy will become 10 trillion, and maybe with that this 40 lakh community will become a 3 crore community, and I have critical mass, so I will be. But we are not going there yet. It's moving so slow. Because productivity, and this is less talked about topic, but if you just to dig a little bit, you'll realize that India is one of the least productive country in the world, because we pride so much in manual labor.
And just to add to that point, I think digital workforce, the workforce, India workforce that I was saying, today India workforce can't sit back and do the same labor we were doing back in the day. It needs to be a lot more intelligent, a lot more value. And that sort of complements and sort of solidifies my point, saying you need to know the dollar value that you create for your businesses, and that is going to make you look so much different in any conversations, because all the people who are doing stuff that Microsoft is beautifully, doing it, sort of going to do it away, possibly the AI or something. We need to compete with Microsoft to say we'll actually put some inhuman intelligence behind it.
The floor is going down.